This is Agile, the highest end frame from Winspace. I've been riding it for over 2000 kilometers now, and in this review I will tell you everything I learned about it. I will compare it to my previous Chinese carbon bike, the Yoelio R12, show you pictures from the inside, tell you the overall weight and costs, and much more. Full disclosure, I invested about $2,000 from my pocket into this bike build. I received the frame, handlebar and wheels for this review from Winspace, but as always I will be 100% honest with you and share the good, the bad and the ugly. I will reveal the overall price later in this video, so let's dive in. This is the first bike I built. At first, I was wondering which group set to choose, Shimano Ultegra Di2 or SRAM Force. In the end, I bought Ultegra because I love its hidden buttons on the top of the shifters. I couldn't imagine riding without them, especially in an aero riding position. After watching a few videos, especially from Cam Nichols and Neil Stanbury, I decided to try shorter cranks. I went from 175 to 165 mm. I will tell you how this change affected me later. Since I love mountains, I also opted for light gearing. This means 50-34 teeth chain rings and an 11-34 cassette. The 11-30 cassette didn't allow me to ride as high a cadence as I would have liked on steeper climbs. I've also speculated on frame size and cockpit dimensions. After careful consideration, I chose the L size, handlebar width of 380 mm and stem length of 105 mm. This was basically the closest combination to my previous bike. The lower stack and a bit longer reach would put me into a lower and more aggressive riding position, but the 5 mm shorter stem compared to the one I had on the R12 compensated for this difference. But we are talking about millimeter differences here. Speaking of geometry, it's worth noting that the M size is inconsistent with other sizes. It has a lower bottom bracket height, shorter chainstay length, and a relatively short head tube compared to the other sizes. I honestly have no idea why they designed it this way. It looks like someone designed the M size for themselves. By the way, before I started building the bike, I examined the frame from the inside. All the parts look smooth and well made, except for the seat stays to seat tube connection, where the joint is visible and the surface is rough. When building the bike, I didn't encounter any issues with internal cable routing or tolerances. I checked every step multiple times, so it took me the whole day. In the end, I was happy because everything worked out well and I now experience the IKEA effect. Anyway, if you plan to build this bike, I recommend watching a video by Klein Concept. Before Agile, I rode the Yoelio R12 for over 15,000 kilometers. I said the following in my review: comfort is probably the main advantage of this bike. But after trying Agile, I realized I was wrong. R12 has a stiffer rear end than Agile, which leads to more vibration transmitted through the frame to the body. Agile is much more comfortable, thanks to the drop seat stays and narrower seat post. I don't feel as much fatigue even when riding super stiff wheels like Loon Mega on bad country roads. However, it should be noted that I have the second largest frame size, which means the frame tubes are longer and flex more than the smaller sizes. In other words, they can absorb vibration better because they are more flexible. Logically, this raises the question of the overall stiffness. Look, I only weigh about 68 kilograms and I am a climber, so I can't do 1500 watt sprints. However, I find the Agile much more lively than the R12, which feels sluggish. My whole build weighs around 7.8 kilograms with Favero Asioma Duo power meter pedals, so about 300 grams less than the R12. Of course, we are still talking about the comparison when using the same wheels, tires and tire pressures. I don't feel any differences in stability compared to the R12. I find the Agile stable in both crosswinds and fast descents. Stability is more influenced by the wheels. For example, when I did a time trial with 82 mm wheels, the crosswinds logically threw me around much more than with 45 mm wheels. On my first rides with the Agile, I told my friends that I didn't expect the jump between these bikes to be so big. Sure, it's not as big a jump as when I switched from an aluminum to a carbon road bike, but the jump in ride experience is significant. I know these are still just feelings and I might be saying the same thing when reviewing the next bike, but objective testing is very hard to do and expensive. So I'm really curious to see what others will say about the Agile. The decision to go with shorter cranks led to an increased average cadence by about 5 rpm and reduced the strain on my knees. I also noticed that I engage my hamstrings better when pedaling than on my old bike. This is a great news because I don't overload my quadriceps as much, so I can ride longer and faster. I also feel closer to unlocking the potential of my glutes, which is a big challenge for me and many other cyclists. Ride performance aside, what I really like about the Agile is its shape. I think it's one of the best looking road frames and I get a lot of sincere compliments. People are usually impressed by the dropped seat stays and the slightly curved top frame tube. They often don't notice the sealed through axles at first glance, but when I show them to them, they nod their heads in appreciation for the attention to detail. Agile can fit up to 32mm tires like most road frames today. Although I'm riding 28mm tires for now, I have a reserve for the future if I decide to go wider. Based on some unscientific tests, wider tires seem to be faster and there is a bonus of added comfort. I must also highlight the customizability of the cockpit dimensions. This option is standard with Chinese brands, but it's usually not available or requires additional charges when buying a bike from Western brands. This means that the larger frame sizes automatically come with wider handlebars and longer stems. The paint is the most visible feature of any frame next to its shape. I honestly don't like the transition from cyan to green. Although it looks better in real life than in the photos, I would have liked the transition to dark blue better. Yeah, I just don't like green very much. The other color variations aren't very original either, and the white and black options are the safe bet. Also, be careful when tightening the T47 bottom bracket. Due to its very narrow flanges, the tool has a high risk of slipping and damaging the flanges or scratching the frame. By the way, I chose the Praxis bottom bracket for this build and I'm telling you, avoid it at all costs. After one ride in the rain, the bearing started to squeak like when pulling a cat's tail. Here is a short video. It only had about 1500 kilometers on it at that time. I solved the problem by adding a bit of grease to the bearings, but just to be safe, I ordered a new one from Token, so we will see if it's needed or not. I also noticed that the through axles are tapered, which causes them to get stuck most of the time when changing the wheels. This is frustrating if you change wheels as often as I do. Standard through axles would be more convenient. Lastly, Winspace's network of distributors is limited worldwide, so we will have to deal with claims online. In my experience, Winspace responds to claims quickly and their customer support is pretty good. However, I can imagine that this can be a deal breaker for some. Now, let's talk about the price. The Agile frame set costs $1,980, but beware, it does not include an integrated handlebar, which costs $290 extra. When you apply my 10% discount code Cyclists Hub 10, it brings the price for both down to $2,043. So is this price acceptable? Unfortunately, I don't have a comparison with Western brands yet, but I believe it is based on the ride feel, build quality, originality and Winspace customer support. I understand why Winspace and other brands are gradually raising prices. For example, their T1500 aeroframe from a few years ago was $400 cheaper than the Agile. However, consumers often associate quality with price, and if the price is too low, they won't trust that the product is good enough. Based on customer feedback from around the world, it is evident that Winspace is one of the Chinese brands with more premium products and a good reputation. The question is whether they are going to price themselves out. I'm also interested in this in the context of the recently introduced Sika Spear RDC frame, which costs $2,700 without the integrated cockpit. The pricing for Europe was set to €3,100 with the cockpit, which is around $3,362. As always, it depends on what you compare the product to, whether low-end OEM frames or high-end frames from Western brands. What do you think about this topic? How much are you willing to pay for a Chinese frame set? How much is too much? Let me know in the comments below. If I calculated the recommended retail prices, this bike would cost $7,612. However, this price includes the Loon Mega wheels, which retail for $2,600, and Favero Asioma Duo pedals, which retail for $742. Using cheaper wheels like the Loon Hyper 2nd Edition and pedals without a power meter, the price would drop to around $6,000. This means the price of this build is comparable with Canyon Aero CF SLX8 with SRAM force, Giant Propel Advance Pro Zero with Shimano Ultegra Di2 and other Western brands. For some, buying a complete bike will be a more tempting option. On the other hand, Western brands usually don't sell lower-end frame sets, so you can't customize your bike as easily if you want to do a custom build. In this case, when comparing high-end frame sets from Western brands, Agile suddenly seems like a better deal. So, let me quickly summarize the pros and cons. I like the right characteristics of the Agile. The bike is comfortable yet lively. I also like its modern, sleek and clean design. Unlike most Western brands, Winspace offers a choice of integrated cockpit dimensions for the perfect fit. The Agile frameset is also much cheaper compared to Western brands, which usually only offer their flagship framesets. On the other hand, installing a T47 bottom bracket requires great care because of its narrow flanges. The color schemes are relatively boring, and the geometry between sizes is not consistent. Winspace also doesn't yet have such a widespread network of distributors. However, based on my experience, they respond quickly to warranty claims. The price of this Agile build is over $7,600, but the Loon Mega wheels and Favero Asioma Duo power meter pedals highly inflate the price. Depending on the alternatives you choose, you can reduce it by almost $2,000. Anyway, I hope you find this review helpful. If you do so, please like and subscribe, because this review really took me a lot of time, money and effort to put together. Remember that you can use my discount code Cyclists Hub 10 for 10% off at winspace.cc. It's the best way to support my channel and reward me for the time I put in. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Ciao!